I invite you to listen to a story with an unexpected and extraordinary finale, where you can never be sure until the end who is your friend and who is your enemy. My new author's story on the Purple Heart Stories channel, and support with a like and subscription if you enjoy it. Emerald Sparkle. Chapter 1, Shadows of Doubt. Trust is like a coin you can only spend once. I remember Emma's face as she smiled at me over her morning coffee, sunbeams dancing in her dark chestnut hair. 36 years old, and her laughter still as bright as the day we met. In the mirror, I no longer saw the Nate Harris who once made field commanders tremble with his mere presence. 43 years, temples touched by the frost of gray, and a scar across my right cheek. A memory of Kandahar now looked like a river map crossing the desert of my face. 10 years together, 10 years sharing a bed, thoughts, dreams. And it all crumbled when Victoria Kingsley burst into our world like the first crack in an icy lake on which we'd been skating carelessly. The crack became a chasm, and I stood on the shore, watching my life sink under water, unable to pull what was most precious from the icy abyss. That morning before waking, I dreamed of the desert. Always the same dream, sand jamming the rifle barrel, and the smell of fear, never ceasing like a swarm of flies over a corpse. I opened my eyes 73 seconds before the alarm. Not from noise, just my blood remembered time better than my brain. Emma slept curled up, her face half hidden by a cascade of hair. In such moments she reminded me of a girl, with that defenseless smile that curved the corners of her lips in sleep. I slipped out of bed silently, as they taught in Special Forces control of every muscle, breathing steady, as if I were not human at all but a shadow on the wall. The early June sun, like a teenager with his first razor, uncertainly slid along the horizon's edge, casting a pinkish glow on the windowpane. 06:27. San Diego still dozed, suburbs silent as conspirators. I put on running shorts and a tank top, springy stretching on the porch where boards creaked slightly under my weight, and the air after night rain was sweet, like the first sip of cola in childhood. And I ran. Not that amateur jogging clerks do on weekends, but a measured, military pace, the trot of a predator conserving strength. 10 miles, 2 laps around the neighborhood. At the first intersection, I noticed a dark blue van without identification marks. The license plate imprinted in my memory involuntarily, AXF 1294. The Thompsons' crooked gate had finally collapsed, and Mr. Bradley across the street had installed a new camera above the garage swivel with infrared night vision. Details absorbed automatically, fitting into a mosaic called anomalies. When you're diffusing tripwires for Continental First Bank, these skills prove invaluable. Returning home, I found Emma in the kitchen. She stood at the stove, tracing figure eights with a wooden spatula and something aromatic sizzling in the pan. Her dark hair was gathered in a messy bun, a couple of unruly strands framing her neck. She wore that turquoise house robe, my Christmas gift from 3 years ago. The fabric at the elbows was worn, but Emma stubbornly refused to part with it. 5 minutes and it'll be ready, she said without turning around. How did you know I'd be back right now? You always return at 7:15, plus or minus 120 seconds. I hugged her from behind, burying my face in her hair, smelling of coconut shampoo and sweet remnants of sleep. Shower first, she slipped from my arms with the ease of water. You smell like a marathoner in Death Valley. In the bathroom mirror, I met eyes with a stranger. 43 years old, and those steely eyes that no soap could wash away. The scar on my cheekbone, a memory of shrapnel in Kandahar, now white on tanned skin, like a crack in an antique porcelain vase. A museum exhibit on which too much foreign blood had been spilled. At breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, we talked about life's small matters. About electricity bills that soared to the heavens every summer because of the air conditioner. About weekends at Lake Powell if weather permitted. About a possible vacation in Europe next summer if the budget could handle such a burden. Christina said some big shot is coming to the store today, Emma noted, spreading strawberry jam on toast. "It'll probably be chaos." "Just don't overdo it," I replied, sipping coffee. "Remember what happened last time when you stood on those killer heels for 6 hours?" Emma winced, remembering swollen ankles and the compresses I applied to her before sleep. "I'll try to delegate some of the work, Captain." She saluted with her fork and glanced at the clock. "Damn, I have to go. I'm closing today, so I'll be back late." She pecked me on the cheek, the aroma of strawberries and coffee, and fluttered out the door, leaving behind a light whirlwind of perfume and a sense of something unsaid. I arrived at the bank at 9, nodded to Roy and Pat, the guards at the entrance, went up to my floor, reviewed the night camera recordings, nothing unusual except for a drunk student trying to use the ATM as a pillow. At 11, I conducted a briefing for new security staff. 2 guys with military bearing and a girl with a short haircut and eyes too familiar, the eyes of someone who had seen death up close. "In the bank, nothing is more important than observation," I told them, paraphrasing the first lesson of sniper school. "See not what they show, but what they try to hide." The day passed without incident, like thousands of days before it. In the evening, I stopped by the market, bought steaks and fresh bread, returned to the house that had become too big for one, killed a couple of hours cooking dinner and watching the news. Emma texted that she was running late. I packed her portion in a container and fell asleep when the late news was still whispering about others' tragedies. Military habit: sleep when you can, kill when you must. I don't know why I'm describing this day in such detail. Maybe because it's in such ordinary days, when nothing happens, that a fuse begins to smolder inside you that will explode your world later, when you've already forgotten about its existence. Emma stood behind the gleaming showcase at Crown Jewel Footwear, holding black pumps worth my weekly salary. Facing her sat a middle-aged woman who seemed to have stepped off a billboard: perfect posture, golden hair strand by strand, pearl earrings, and an ivory cashmere dress. "This model has a more stable heel," Emma said, demonstrating the shoes. "They're perfect for business meetings where you have to stand a lot." The woman barely touched the shoes with her fingertips, as if touching something practical might soil her flawless manicure. "No, too functional. Show me those with the red soles." Emma smiled professionally and went to get another pair. She had worked at Crown Jewel for 5 years and knew every pair of shoes as a cartographer knows the curves of rivers. Most clients were like this, groomed like purebred cats, with that special facial expression that appears when you don't need to look at price tags. Between these women and my wife lay an abyss, deep as the Mariana Trench. They existed in different dimensions, in a world where money appears from air, and in a world where every dollar must be clawed from life's hard soil. In a world where a fur coat is a one-day whim, and in a world where a new television is the result of 3 months' savings. During her lunch break, Emma called me. I was just finishing reviewing recordings from the bank vault cameras. "Nate, are you free?" "For you, always," I replied, switching the screen to a mountain panorama screensaver. "How are things in the world of stunning fashion?" "Same as usual," she sighed. "But Christmas isn't far off and everyone wants to shine at corporate parties. Listen, do you think we can buy a new air conditioner this summer? Ours is about to breathe its last cold breath." "I'm putting money aside for it little by little," I answered, remembering the figures in our savings account. "If the bank isn't robbed and I don't go blind from paperwork, we should manage." "Wonderful." Her voice rang with that enthusiasm I fell in love with her for. "Okay, I have to run. That wealthy client I mentioned this morning has arrived." "Good luck with her," I said. "Love you." "Love you too." After lunch, she entered the store, Victoria Kingsley. Of course, Emma didn't know yet who this woman was with a queen's posture and eyes accustomed to seeing only what belonged to her. Emma told me about this later, that night in bed, when I listened to her story about her workday, as I listened every evening. Victoria Kingsley was a tall brunette with flawless makeup and a way of moving as if every step was being filmed for a glossy magazine cover. She entered the store with the grace of a cheetah, surrounded by an invisible but palpable field of confidence. Behind her followed an assistant pale as a ghost, with a tablet and phone at the ready, like a squire to a knight. "I need shoes for a charity auction," she declared to the administrator. "Something original, and please don't show me anything I might see on someone else in this city." The administrator was flustered, but Emma, noticing the confusion, approached the visitor. "May I help you?" she asked with a professional smile. "We have several exclusive models that were delivered only to our store." Victoria assessed her with a glance, like a jeweler evaluating a rough diamond. "I hope that's not just talk." For the next 2 hours, Emma showed Victoria pair after pair. She was demanding and capricious, rejecting models for the most insignificant reasons: heel too high, toe too pointed, buckle too flashy. But Emma didn't lose patience, finding either a counterargument or a new pair of shoes for each objection. According to Emma, at some point Victoria even began to enjoy this game. She no longer dismissed suggestions but carefully examined each model, asked questions about materials and designers. Emma answered knowledgeably, and Victoria clearly appreciated this. In the end, she chose suede shoes in deep blue with a thin silver heel, the most expensive in the collection. She paid with a platinum credit card without even glancing at the amount, as if we were talking about a handful of change, not a figure with 3 zeros. After completing her purchases, Victoria lingered at the cash register, watching as Emma packed the shoes in a branded box tied with a satin ribbon. "Have you worked here long?" she asked, watching my wife's deft hand movements. "5 years," Emma answered, writing the buyer's name on the gift card in calligraphic handwriting. "It shows," Victoria nodded. "You have excellent taste and a rare ability to understand customers' desires, qualities that are as rare today as honesty in politics." Emma blushed. She wasn't accustomed to compliments from clients. Usually, wealthy ladies perceived salespeople as pieces of furniture, functional but invisible. "Thank you," she said, handing over the bag with the purchase. "I hope the shoes bring you luck." "I create my own luck," Victoria smiled. Then, pausing for a moment, added, "Would you like to have coffee with me? The workday is ending soon, isn't it?" Emma was confused. This had never happened before. In 5 years of work, not a single client had offered to meet her outside the store. "I have plans at home," she began, thinking about how I was waiting for her for dinner. "Half an hour, no more," Victoria insisted with a disarming smile. "There's an excellent place across the street, the best cappuccino in the city." There was something hypnotic in Victoria's eyes, a mixture of authority and genuine interest, that made Emma agree. "All right, half an hour," she said, removing her name badge. The cafe was deserted and cozy, like in old European films. Victoria ordered cappuccino for Emma and espresso for herself, plus some French pastries with names that sounded like incantations. "Tell me about yourself," Victoria suggested, elegantly stirring sugar in her tiny cup. "There's not much to tell," Emma shrugged. "I work in the store, live with my husband in Palm Heights, an ordinary life." "Do you have children?" "No, we haven't planned for any yet." Victoria nodded, as if confirming some thought of her own. "And your husband, what does he do?" "He's head of security at Continental First Bank. Before that, he served in special forces." Victoria's eyes sparkled with interest, like a predator noticing movement in the grass. "Military, how intriguing. And now he's guarding other people's money. Irony of fate, don't you think?" Emma didn't know how to respond. She had never thought about my work in that way. "And what do you do?" she asked, changing the subject. Victoria leaned back in her chair and smiled, broadly and somewhat predatorily, like a shark sensing blood. Me, I'm Mrs. Alexander Kingsley. She pronounced this name as if it should explain everything. Officially, I run a charitable foundation for children with special needs. Unofficially, she leaned closer, I enjoy life. She laughed, and Emma smiled uncertainly in response, not fully understanding what her new acquaintance meant. Victoria told her about herself, about the charity auctions she organized, about travels on private jets, about celebrities she entertained in her home. Emma listened as if mesmerized. It was a completely different world, sparkling like a diamond necklace, full of possibilities she had never even considered. "You know, Emma," Victoria said when their cups were empty, "I rarely meet people like you. Most women in my circle are empty shells, thinking only about how to outdo their neighbors with a new handbag or an affair with the tennis coach." Emma blushed, not knowing how to react to such a compliment. "I like you," Victoria continued. "You have style and character. Next Thursday I'm having a small cocktail evening for friends. Nothing pompous, wine, light appetizers, pleasant music. Come with your husband. I think you'll find it interesting." Emma hesitated. On one hand, she was flattered by the attention of such a woman as Victoria. On the other, she wasn't sure we would fit into a company of people for whom $1,000 bottle of champagne was just a warm-up before the real evening. "I don't know, my husband and I. We're from a different circle," she finally said. "Nonsense," Victoria waved dismissively. "Circles exist to be crossed. Think about it. And if you decide to come, here's my card. Just call in advance so I can add you to the guest list." Victoria handed Emma a cream card with gold embossing. Emma took it, feeling as if she'd been given a key to a secret door leading to a parallel universe. She didn't go to that cocktail evening. She told me about the invitation, and I admit, I didn't express enthusiasm. "Too high ceilings for us, baby," I said then. Emma agreed, but I saw a shadow of disappointment in her eyes like a cloud briefly covering the sun. However, Victoria Kingsley wasn't a woman who accepted refusals. A week later, she appeared in the store again, this time to buy boots, and again invited Emma for coffee. Then there was lunch at a restaurant whose name Emma had previously only seen in society columns. Then an invitation to a closed showing of a new collection by a designer whose name sounded like an incantation from old books. Gradually, Emma began spending more and more time with Victoria. Sometimes she returned home late, excited and glowing, with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in years, and told me about the people she'd met, the places she'd visited, like an explorer returning from an expedition, having discovered a new continent. I didn't object, at least, not at first. I liked seeing her so inspired, as if she'd come alive again. But something inside me tensed every time she mentioned Victoria's name. It was like that feeling before an ambush in the mountains of Afghanistan, when skin becomes too tight and the air around thickens like water. Emma began to change. First, it was little things, a new haircut with caramel highlights, brighter makeup, a designer blouse instead of the usual t-shirts from chain stores. Then more expensive items appeared, a handbag that made me mentally calculate how many months we'd have to save for it. On sale, Nate, it cost almost like a regular one. A silk scarf with hand-painted designs, shoes that seemed alien in our life, like a tropical butterfly in northern forests. One day, sorting through bills, I came across a statement from Emma's credit card. The monthly amount was twice the usual. When I asked her about it, she became embarrassed, like a teenager caught with a cigarette. Victoria invited me to a charity auction. I couldn't go in an old dress, and I needed matching shoes. But we had such a successful fundraising, and I met Senator Brown's wife. I nodded, not wanting to spoil her mood, but the worm of worry inside me grew and writhed like a leech full of blood. This wasn't the Emma I knew, simple, practical, counting every dollar with the same care that a sniper measures the distance to target. One evening I came across her trying on a brooch, an elegant flower with petals studded with small diamonds, sparkling in the lamplight like dewdrops on a spiderweb. "Where did this come from?" I asked, not remembering such a piece of jewelry in Emma's collection. "Victoria gave it to me," she answered without looking away from the mirror. "She says this design never suited her, and with my eye color it looks perfect." I nodded silently. I didn't want to say that I didn't like how Victoria was buying my wife with trinkets, like a trainer buying a tiger with pieces of meat. I didn't want to seem jealous or petty. After all, it was just a brooch, I told myself. It meant nothing. But it did mean something. Every new thing, every dinner at a restaurant where a bottle of wine cost as much as our weekly grocery budget, every visit to a closed event, all of this distanced Emma from our former life. And from me. Victoria was introducing Emma to her circle, introducing her to the right people, inviting her to closed sales, parties, charity auctions. Emma observed the life of the rich from the inside, like an anthropologist in a tribe with unknown rituals. How easily they spend money, what problems concern them, how they relate to each other with that special mixture of external courtesy and hidden rivalry. From Emma, I learned bits of information about Victoria and her husband. That Alexander Kingsley was rarely home, constantly traveling on business for his empire. That Victoria said her husband's money wasn't always as clean as a baby's tear, but then added with a smile, though, like any large fortune in this country. I didn't yet suspect how right she was, and how dirty that money could be. The climax came when Victoria invited Emma to a closed jewelry showing for VIP clients. It was an elite jewelry house that accepted buyers only by appointment, guarded like Fort Knox. Emma told me about it, choking with excitement, about how they were greeted with Dom Perignon champagne, how obliging consultants in black suits displayed jewelry on velvet cushions, how one woman bought a necklace for the amount equal to a bank manager's annual salary without even blinking. Victoria introduced Emma as a dear friend, and she was treated with the same attention as the other clients, although it was obvious that Emma wasn't going to buy anything. For her, it was a visit to an exotic zoo where she could observe rare creatures but not touch them. And then Victoria drew Emma's attention to a pair of emerald earrings. They weren't the most expensive in the collection, but still cost so much that Emma could only sigh dreamily. "They would perfectly match your eyes," Victoria said, "and that emerald dress you tried on last week." "They're beautiful," Emma agreed, watching as the stones played in the light like fragments of a tropical sea. "But such things aren't for people like me." Victoria smiled mysteriously and went to talk to the manager. Meanwhile, Emma continued examining the earrings, unable to take her eyes off them. The emeralds were small but pure, deep green color in a classic gold setting. Elegant but not screaming about the owner's wealth. Just the kind of jewelry, Emma thought, that a successful woman could wear without causing envy but attracting admiring glances. A few minutes later, Victoria returned with a triumphant smile, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. "Here's what I'll tell you," she began in a conspiratorial tone. "They can offer you a special discount, 70%. "What?" Emma couldn't believe her ears. "Why?" "I'm a regular customer," Victoria shrugged, "and I have a special relationship with the owner. It's common practice for select clients." "Well, what do you say? Even with the discount, it's not cheap, but you deserve such earrings, Emma." Emma hesitated. Even with the huge discount, this was the most expensive piece of jewelry she could ever afford, more than she spent on clothes in a year. But the emerald seemed to hypnotize her, like a snake's eyes hypnotizing a rabbit, and Victoria's approving smile gave her determination, like a hand pushing her forward. She took out her credit card, feeling a mixture of excitement, shame, and adrenaline, similar to the first parachute jump, when you step into the void, not knowing if the canopy will open. When the consultant took the card to process the payment, Emma felt slightly dizzy. What was she doing? What would she tell me? But these thoughts were quickly replaced by the excitement of the purchase and gratitude to Victoria for this magical moment of transformation. The jewelry was packaged in an elegant black velvet box. When Emma left the store with Victoria, she felt like she had become part of another world, a world where such purchases are made casually, like buying chewing gum at the supermarket checkout. "You look happy," Victoria noticed when they got into her luxurious midnight-colored sedan. "I've never bought anything like this," Emma admitted. "It's like the first sip of champagne makes your head spin." Victoria smiled, and something predatory flashed in her smile, like a shark's shadow beneath the water's surface. But Emma, caught up in euphoria, didn't notice it. "You get used to it quickly," Victoria said. "Believe me, the second such purchase comes easier, like the second martini." In the evening, Emma returned home where I had already prepared dinner. Steak with vegetables, not a restaurant dish, but quite decent. I noticed she was excited as soon as she crossed the threshold. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes shining as if she had a fever. "Did you have a good day?" I asked, helping her take off her coat. Emma nodded, then took a small box from her purse, which she held as if it contained a fragile bird's egg. "Nate, I want to show you something." She opened the box, and I saw the earrings, emeralds in yellow gold settings. Definitely expensive. Even my untrained eye could see the quality of the work. "Beautiful," I said cautiously, as if navigating a minefield. "Really?" Emma beamed. I bought them today, at a closed jewelry house showing where Victoria invited me. But don't worry, there was an incredible discount, 70%. It's an exclusive offer for special clients." I looked carefully at the earrings, then shifted my gaze to my wife. I had many questions, but I asked only one. "How much did they cost, Emma, even with the discount?" She named the amount, stammering slightly, like a criminal at their first interrogation. I calculated mentally. It was more than we spent on food for 2 months. More than the air conditioner she had mentioned recently cost. More than the security of our future that we were slowly building, saving bit by bit. I wasn't angry. I was more puzzled, like a scientist discovering a new form of life under a microscope. This was so unlike Emma, the practical, sensible woman who always planned our budget with the same care that I planned patrol routes in Kandahar. "Emma, why do you need such an expensive thing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral like a therapist's. "What do you mean, why?" She clearly didn't expect this reaction. "They're beautiful, you said so yourself." "Yes, beautiful, but that doesn't explain why you spent so much money on them." Emma began to defend herself, like a cornered animal. "This is the first time I've allowed myself something like this, Nate, and it's a good investment. Gold and precious stones only increase in value. Besides," she faltered, lowering her eyes, "when we have a daughter, I can pass them on to her." This sounded strange. We had never seriously discussed children. Emma had health issues that made pregnancy risky, and we had somehow silently accepted that we might remain just the two of us, like two trees growing with intertwined roots. Dinner passed in an atmosphere reminiscent of the air before a storm, heavy, electrified, ready to explode at the first spark. We talked about trivialities, avoiding the topic of the earrings and Victoria. When Emma washed the dishes, I noticed she had already put on her new acquisition. The emeralds beautifully highlighted the green of her eyes, but for some reason it seemed to me that a stranger was standing at our sink, similar in appearance, but with a different soul, different thoughts, different desires. For the first time in our years of marriage, we went to bed without resolving our disagreement. I pretended to be asleep, and Emma tossed and turned beside me for a long time. I heard her get up several times, apparently to look at her purchase, like an addict checking their stash. Lying in the darkness, I thought about what was happening to us, about the crack that had appeared in our life since Victoria Kingsley's appearance, about how the earrings had become a symbol of something much larger, the change I saw in Emma day by day, like the slow transformation of a butterfly, only in reverse from a flying creature to a crawling one. I didn't yet know what high price we would have to pay for these emeralds, a price that couldn't be measured in money. Chapter 2, Temptation and Betrayal. 3 months had passed since the emerald earrings appeared in our home. 3 months, and I hardly recognized my own wife anymore. I increasingly caught myself thinking that Emma, the Emma I had known for 10 years, was dissolving into thin air, like a ghost at dawn. In her place appeared a woman who looked like her outwardly, but with different eyes, in which I could read neither thoughts nor desires. A woman whose steps through our house sounded different, more confident, harder. Victoria Kingsley had changed my wife, as a jeweler changes the cheap setting of a precious stone, and I didn't know how to get back what belonged to me by right of love and loyalty. The new Emma came home later and later, often with purchases wrapped in the rustling paper of stores whose names I had previously heard only in celebrity news. Each time she had an explanation, an incredible discount, a sale only for the chosen ones, a gift from Victoria who, this didn't suit at all. A designer scarf worth my weekly salary. Shoes, one glance at which made my inner accountant clutch his heart. Face cream, a small bottle of which cost as much as we spent on dinners out in a month. Even her style of dress had changed. Gone were the simple jeans and t-shirts, the bright summer dresses she bought at sales in shopping centers. Now she wore things she herself called basic, solid colors, perfect cut, with labels whose meaning I could only guess at. She got a new hairstyle, more sophisticated, with highlights and root coloring, with care whose name I couldn't pronounce. Her nails were now not just trimmed and polished, but decorated with some complex pattern that shimmered in the light like the scales of an exotic fish. I watched these changes silently, as I once watched the enemy through an optical sight, with the same attentiveness and the same sense of detachment. I tried to talk several times, but Emma avoided serious conversation like a ghost passing through a wall. "You're worrying about nothing, Nate. It's just a scarf, not the end of the world. Victoria introduced me to an excellent stylist, that's all." Our communication became increasingly superficial, like a river in drought. We had breakfast together and exchanged a few phrases about the weather, about the news, about who would pick up my coat from the dry cleaner. She called me during the day less often. At first I assumed she was just too busy, but gradually realized she had nothing more to tell me. Her real life now took place with Victoria, in a world of sparkle and champagne bubbling like a mountain stream. I watched how every morning she put on those same emerald earrings, like a talisman, as if they were the key to that new door she had opened for herself. On days when she didn't wear them, she looked slightly more like her former self. The wrinkle between her eyebrows, a pensive look into nowhere, the habit of twirling a strand of hair around her finger while reading. On days when the emeralds gleamed in her ears, she was almost a stranger, with this new, confident walk and a gaze that slid over me without lingering, as if over a piece of furniture. One evening, when I returned home earlier than usual, I found her sitting on the edge of our bed with an open magazine. It wasn't the usual glossy magazine. It was a catalog of luxury items, thick as the Bible of a new cult. Emma was looking at a photo of diamond-studded watches, and her face was strangely motionless, focused, like a sniper preparing to pull the trigger. "How beautiful," she said, noticing me in the doorway. "Would you like such a watch?" I asked, more to keep the conversation going. The price of the watch, listed in small print at the bottom of the page, exceeded our annual budget for all expenses, including the mortgage on the house. Emma looked at me with a long gaze, and in it was something I hadn't seen before, a mixture of sadness, thoughtfulness, and some new knowledge, as if she had read a book that turned her understanding of the world upside down. "Before, no," she answered, "but now, it's as if I've begun to understand why people want such things." "And why?" "Because they deserve beauty, because life is short like a flash in the darkness, because She fell silent, ran her finger over the glossy page, because it makes you special. Everything was leading up to that moment of madness when Victoria called Emma and made an offer that changed everything. Emma was sitting in our kitchen when her phone rang. I was cooking pasta with seafood for us, a dish Emma used to love to the point of trembling knees. Lately, she rarely ate at home, and I thought the surprise would please her. But when she answered the call, her eyes widened like a child's in a toy store, and she got up from the table, going to another room to talk without me. I heard snippets of phrases, seriously, but how? Are you sure? I need to think about it. When she returned, she looked like someone who had received an unexpected inheritance, shocked but excited, not quite believing their luck. What happened? I asked, stirring the sauce with the smell of sea and white wine. Victoria, she began, and her voice trembled slightly like a string under inexperienced fingers. She has 2 tickets for an exclusive tour to Latin America, a week in a luxurious place, all expenses paid. She's offering me to go with her. To Latin America, I stopped stirring the sauce. What specific place? She didn't say exactly. Says it's a surprise, it's a private tour for special guests. I frowned, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, the same instinct that had saved my life more than once. And when is this tour? In 2 weeks. So soon, but you have work and we were going too. I can take a week's vacation, she interrupted me. It's quiet at the store now, the sale season is over, and what were we going to do? I opened my mouth but realized I had nothing to say. We really hadn't planned anything for that time. Before, we used to plan together, leaning over the calendar like generals over a map. Now for her it was just a rhetorical question hiding indifference to my opinion. Do you have to go? I finally asked. We hardly see each other lately. She came up to me, and for the first time in many days really looked into my eyes. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of that former Emma, caring, open, thinking of me with the same tenderness as one thinks of a beloved book worn to shreds from rereading. You're right, she said, putting her hand on my shoulder. We've grown too distant. Maybe we need a break from each other, time to think. I'll come back and everything will be different. I heard something in those words that made the blood in my veins turn to liquid nitrogen. Not certainty that she would return, but doubt, as if she herself hadn't decided whether she wanted to return to our ordinary life or preferred to stay in that sparkling mirage that Victoria had painted before her with watercolor paints of luxury. A week later, Emma announced to me over dinner that she had decided to go with Victoria. We were eating delivered pizza. I no longer cooked for us, knowing she was unlikely to come home on time. She looked at me across the table, nervously twirling a wine glass in her hands like an exotic bird with a broken wing. It's just for a few days, she said, trying to appear casual. Victoria says it will be a wonderful vacation. Sun, ocean, excursions. But you don't even know exactly where you're going, I noted. Victoria said it's a surprise. The whole charm is in the unexpectedness. It's such a special tour for friends. She often goes there. And who else is going? Emma shrugged, like a student who doesn't know the answer to the professor's question. Some of her friends, probably. I don't know all the details. Victoria says I'll find out everything on the spot. I looked at her, feeling anxiety building inside me like a black storm cloud filling the horizon. 10 years in special forces had taught me one thing. If a situation seems strange, then it is strange. Normal people don't go to another country without knowing exactly where they're going and with whom, unless it's a covert operation undercover. I don't like this, Emma, I said directly. All this sounds too suspicious. Suspicious? She raised her eyebrows like an actress rehearsing a scene of surprise. It's Victoria, not some random person from the street. She's my friend. A friend who appeared in your life 3 months ago and completely changed it. Emma pushed away her plate with unfinished pizza, as if rejecting not only the food but also our conversation. "That's what this is about," she said with a chill in her voice. "You don't like that I've changed. You want me to remain the same boring Emma who only works at the store and cooks your dinners." "I never found you boring," I objected, feeling the conversation slipping into dangerous territory like a car on an icy road. "And it's not about the changes, it's about how we hardly talk lately. I don't recognize you, Emma." A complex expression flickered across her face, a mixture of guilt, anger, and something else I couldn't read, like a hieroglyph on stone. "Maybe you never really knew me," she said quietly. "Maybe I've always wanted more than the life we led. Maybe I just didn't dare to admit it." "More," my voice grew hoarse like sandpaper. "You mean money, luxury, is that what you need?" We looked at each other across the table, as if across the Grand Canyon. "You're just jealous," she finally said, and the words fell between us like stones. "Jealous that I have an interesting life. All you care about is your job at the bank and football matches on TV." I saw that she immediately regretted what she said, but it was too late. The words hung between us like poisonous fog. "Do what you want, Emma," I said, getting up from the table. "I can't stop you." The next day we hardly spoke. In the evening, I helped her pack her suitcase, more out of inertia than desire. We moved around the room like ghosts, avoiding even accidental touches, afraid that a spark of static electricity would ignite the nitroglycerin of our unspoken feelings. When I drove her to the airport, she kissed me on the cheek before boarding, and that touch was light as a butterfly's wing, just as fleeting and meaningless. "Everything will be fine, Nate. I'll be back in a week and we'll talk." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Somewhere in my peripheral vision, I noticed Victoria, elegant, with perfect posture, watching us with a slight half-smile, like observing an interesting social experiment. And then I was pierced by a sharp premonition of trouble, the same one that made me order the patrol to take cover a second before sniper bullets tore through the air. A private plane, not a huge airliner, but something between a business jet and a small passenger plane, landed at a small airfield lost among lush tropical vegetation. There were no signs or names around. The employees spoke a mixture of Spanish and local dialect, of which Emma didn't understand a word, as if someone had constructed a language specifically to confuse the uninitiated. Victoria and Emma were met by a limousine the color of wet asphalt with tinted windows. Inside it smelled of expensive leather and some exotic aroma reminiscent of both sandalwood and sea breeze. The driver, a dark-skinned man in an impeccable uniform, opened the door for them without saying a word, like an actor in a play without lines. "Where are we going?" Emma asked when they started moving. Poor neighborhoods with shabby houses the color of faded photographs passed by the window. The locals looked at the limousine with curiosity and barely concealed hostility, as if at an alien spaceship that had landed in the midst of their sad reality. "Relax, darling." Victoria opened the bar inside the limousine and poured herself champagne into a crystal glass. "You'll see soon." "But still, what country are we in?" Emma insisted, feeling a strange anxiety rising from somewhere deep in her solar plexus. Victoria laughed, a deep, slightly hoarse laugh devoid of genuine joy. "What difference does it make? A little paradise on the border of 3 countries, a place where there are no rules and restrictions, where people with money can be themselves." Emma frowned but remained silent. Something in Victoria's tone, in her smile reminiscent of a predator's grin, made her feel the first pricks of real anxiety, like pins in her fingertips before a storm. After about an hour, the limousine approached huge gates surrounded by a high fence with barbed wire. Guards with automatic weapons checked the car, then let it inside. Beyond the gates opened a true tropical paradise, perfectly trimmed lawns, exotic flowers of all shades of the rainbow, pools with water the color of molten turquoise, fountains dancing in the sun's rays, and a luxurious colonial-style villa as if from the pages of a glossy magazine about billionaire travels. Welcome to our little secret. Victoria smiled with triumph in her voice. The inner courtyard of the La Corona villa was planted with palm trees leaning like courtiers before a monarch. In the center stood a fountain in the form of a naked woman holding a pitcher from which water flowed the color of molten silver. The service staff, maids in strict uniforms reminiscent of nun novices' clothing, a butler with an inscrutable poker player's face, chefs in immaculately white jackets, greeted them with bows, as if they were royalty. Emma was led to her room, luxurious apartments overlooking the jungle and mountains in the distance. On the bed lay an evening dress the color of midnight sea. Next to it, a box with crocodile leather shoes with red soles, and a small box inlaid with mother of pearl. "Is all this for me?" Emma asked when the maid opened the box, displaying a sapphire necklace sparkling like a piece of the starry sky. "Of course," answered Victoria, standing in the doorway like a guard at a treasury. "We have dinner tonight. Wear something special. I'll come for you at 8. When Emma entered the villa's huge dining room, dressed in a blue dress flowing over her body like water, and with sapphires on her neck shimmering with every movement, she immediately noticed that something was wrong. In the room were women she had met at Victoria's parties, elegant, wealthy, with the bored eyes of fish in too small an aquarium. But there were also other guests, young men with the bodies of Greek statues and the faces of Hollywood actors. They acted casual and confident, as if they were the owners of this place, not guests, and in their eyes read a professional readiness to fulfill any desire. Dinner was exquisite, dishes whose names Emma couldn't pronounce without an accent, wine she had only read about in novels about the rich and famous. Waiters moved silently like shadows, filling glasses as soon as they emptied. The conversation was light and often ambiguous. The atmosphere became increasingly intimate with each glass of champagne, whose bubbles tickled the throat like harbingers of something forbidden. Emma felt out of place, as if she had accidentally ended up in an erotic film instead of a romantic comedy, especially when she noticed how one of the women, the wife of a famous politician, if she remembered correctly, openly flirted with two young men at once, running her fingers along their arms. They responded to her with professional gallantry, clearly accustomed to such situations, like actors to their lines. After dinner, most of the guests moved to the terrace, where live music played jazz, sensual and viscous, like pre-storm sultriness. Couples began to dance too close for just dancing, more like a prelude to something more. Some were already leaving in pairs into the depths of the villa, holding hands and smiling meaningfully, like conspirators sharing a common secret. Victoria led Emma aside to a small living room where no one was. In her eyes sparkled lights, either from alcohol or from excitement or from anticipation of someone else's fall. "Time to show our cards, darling," she said, pouring herself more champagne into a crystal flute. "This isn't quite an ordinary tour. This is a special place for women who want to get pleasure away from their husbands. All these handsome men are professionals. They know how to deliver pleasure. Your husband will never know. Don't you want to try something new while you can?" Emma looked at her, feeling the ground slip from under her feet, as if she were standing on the deck of a sinking ship. Thoughts tangled, and her heart pounded like a bird in a cage. "You brought me to a brothel," she managed to say. "You thought I would, with these men." Victoria laughed, a deep, slightly hoarse laugh in which there was not a drop of merriment, only the triumph of a predator who had lured its victim into a trap. "How naive you are, Emma. This isn't a brothel. This is an exclusive club for women who can afford real freedom. Your husband will never be able to give you such a life as you deserve. And here you can be yourself without restrictions. Here women choose, here they decide, here they take what they want. And most importantly, no one will ever know." Emma recoiled from Victoria in disgust, as if she had suddenly turned into a poisonous snake. "I love my husband," she said, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "I would never betray him." Victoria shrugged, sipping champagne with the air of someone talking to a capricious child. "As you wish, But tomorrow, you'll regret it. These boys know how to do things your husband has never even heard of." Emma rushed away from the living room, ran through the entire house, paying no attention to surprised looks, and locked herself in her room. She leaned against the door, breathing heavily, like after a long cross-country run. By the mirror on the dressing table still lay the open box with sapphires. Emma tore off the necklace and threw it at the wall, as if throwing away a snake. The expensive stones scattered across the floor like fragments of her trust in Victoria. She cried for a long time, sitting on the floor of her luxurious bedroom. Cried from shame, from realizing her stupidity, from understanding how far she had gone in her fascination with another life. Through gaps in the curtains showed the dim light of lanterns illuminating the villa's garden. From the living room came music, laughter, the clink of glasses, sounds of the life she had wanted to touch, not understanding its true essence. Emma took out her phone, thinking of calling me. But what would she say? How would she explain where she was? She dialed the number, looking at the screen, her finger hovering over the call button, like a compass needle that had lost north. Then she decisively put the phone aside. She was to blame for being in this situation. She had to find a way out herself, like a traveler lost in the forest finds their way by the moss on trees. She washed her face with cold water, trying to come to her senses. Thoughts gradually cleared like the sky after a storm. In the morning she would leave, Emma decided. Find a way to get to the nearest city with an airport and buy a ticket home. But first, she needed to survive this night, like a soldier survives the night before a decisive battle. Emma changed into the pajamas she had brought with her, simple cotton, with a small pattern of wildflowers, not the silk nightgown the maid had thoughtfully laid out on the bed. This familiar thing calmed her somewhat, reminding her of home, of me, of our former life, imperfect, but real. She lay in the huge bed, turning off all the lights. Sleep wouldn't come. Images of recent months flashed through her mind: Victoria's smile, the emerald earrings, new acquaintances from the world of glossy magazines, expensive restaurants with snow-white tablecloths, and gradually, step by step, she began to understand how much she had changed, how far she had gone from the woman she had been. And from me, the person she had sworn to love in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. God, Nate, she thought, staring into the darkness. What have I done? Late at night, Emma was awakened by the sound of gunshots. She jumped out of bed, not understanding in her sleepiness what was happening. The lights in the villa went out, as if someone had thrown a black cover over the world. In the darkness, screams in Spanish, sounds of struggle, breaking glass could be heard, as if titans were fighting somewhere nearby. She groped for her phone and turned on the flashlight. At that moment, someone began banging on her room door, shouting something in Spanish. Emma rushed around the room, looking for shelter, but in the spacious bedroom there was nowhere to hide, like in a heart in the palm of a hand. The door burst open with a crash. 3 men with weapons in masks hiding their faces rushed into the room. They roughly grabbed Emma, dragged her into the courtyard where other women had already been gathered, including Victoria. All in night clothes, disheveled, frightened. Some were crying, others were in shock, eyes empty as dolls. The bandits shouted and pushed them, forcing them to go to the exit from the territory. Beyond the gate stood a truck with an open bed. The women were roughly pushed inside, like cattle to slaughter. Emma found herself next to Victoria, who looked completely crushed, not a trace of her usual self-confidence, as if expensive porcelain had been washed of its golden painting. While the bandits were locking the truck's side, Emma carefully took her phone from her pajama pocket. Hiding behind other women, she managed to take a photo of the surroundings. The dim light of headlights illuminated a characteristic mountain resembling a sleeping dragon and an old church in the distance with a crooked cross. Painfully slowly, the message loaded to me. Kidnapped. Help. Don't know where I am. She attached the photo and pressed send, praying that the signal was strong enough. One of the bandits noticed the screen's light, roughly snatched the phone from her hands and smashed it against the truck's side, like an egg against a frying pan. The engine roared and the vehicle moved, taking the women into the unknown. The road was bumpy. The women were thrown from side to side like dolls in the hands of a merciless child. Many cried, some prayed, fingering rosaries or crosses on their necks. Victoria, sitting next to Emma, suddenly grabbed her hand. Her face in the dim moonlight was deathly pale, as if dusted with flour. "They'll kill us, Emma," she whispered. "My husband doesn't even know where I really am, and if he somehow finds out, after everything I've done behind his back, I don't even want to think about it." Emma pulled her hand away, as if she had touched something unclean. "Then pray that my message got through," she said in an icy tone, "because my husband is the only one who can save us." A bandit at the edge of the bed shouted something in Spanish, and the women instantly fell silent, like birds at the sight of a hawk. The truck picked up speed, going deeper into the jungle on an unlit road, where every branch whipped the bed like a whip in the hands of a torturer. Emma looked at the dark sky studded with stars indifferent to human suffering, and thought of me, wondering if the message had arrived, if I had seen it, if I could understand where she was. And if I could save not only her, but also her soul, which had so easily followed the temptation. She vowed to herself that if she got out, she would never again betray either me or our love. But first, she needed to survive this nightmare into which her pursuit of the illusion of a luxurious life had turned, like chasing a mirage in the desert. Chapter 3: The Path of Salvation. After Emma's departure, our house became like a wax museum, lifeless, frozen, with artificial light falling on empty chairs. I walked from room to room like a ghost of myself, finding no peace. Had breakfast looking at her empty chair, the same one where she sat every morning, tucking her left leg under herself, as she always had since childhood. Returned from work to a silent house, where even the walls seemed to have forgotten how human voice sounds. Fell asleep on my side of the bed, leaving space for her, as if emptiness could materialize into the woman I loved. But hardest of all was not the loneliness, which I had faced dozens of times in hot spots, but the doubt eroding me from within, like rust on a steel blade. Had our estrangement been growing long before Victoria, and she had merely accelerated the inevitable, like a catalyst does a chemical reaction? Did Emma need me as I needed her? And the most terrifying question, which I feared to utter even in whispers in the darkness of the bedroom, would she want to return? I couldn't find my place, like a prisoner in a cell 2 steps wide. Bank, home, supermarket, home again. Mechanical actions, automatic answers to colleagues' questions. Yes, everything's fine. No, nothing urgent. Of course, I'll handle this by Monday. Outwardly, I remained the same Nate Harris, head of security, former special forces, reliable as a magazine in a pistol. Inside was a desert, gray and lifeless, interrupted by rare short messages from Emma. Landed safely. It's very beautiful here. Bad connection, will write later. This was so unlike her. Emma usually wrote extensively, as if keeping a diary addressed to me alone. She shared impressions, details, worried that I knew where she was and what was happening to her at every moment. In these sparse messages, I felt a foreign hand, as if Victoria stood behind her shoulder, dictating what could be written to a husband and what could not, like a censor in wartime. But one day Emma didn't contact me at all. I didn't write, didn't want to seem intrusive, like a lovesick teenager losing his head over his first love. With each hour of silence, my thoughts grew darker, like clouds before a hurricane. What if she decided not to return? What if I was now just a reminder of yesterday for her, like an old photograph kept on a shelf out of sentimentality but no longer looked at? I was sitting in the kitchen, mindlessly staring at the wall when the message came. One glance at the screen was enough to make my heart skip a beat, like an engine with a stuck valve. Kidnapped. Help. Don't know where I am. And a photograph, blurry, taken in haste, like a final cry before falling into an abyss. Doubts and resentments instantly evaporated, like morning fog under the rays of merciless sun. I was no longer a deceived husband or a failure who couldn't provide his wife with a luxurious life of receptions and diamonds. I was what I had always been deep down, a special forces operative for whom the mission was above all. And my mission now was to save Emma, even if it meant burning the world to ashes. I enlarged the photograph, peering at every detail like a jeweler at a diamond looking for flaws. Tres Picos Mountain, 3 peaks, resembled a sleeping dragon when viewed from a certain angle. San Miguel Church with a broken cross. I recognized this place. Our group had conducted an operation against the Los Sombras cartel there 6 years ago. Lightning sweep, as we called it. We went in, worked, took the goods and documents, left. Everything clean, no traces like ghosts. The operation didn't exist on paper, a black page in a black book. Tres Picos was a border region between 3 countries in Central America, a real cesspool of the criminal world. An ideal place for drug dealers, smugglers, and anyone who wanted to disappear like smoke in the wind. I called my former commander, Colonel Taylor. He now worked for a private military company but maintained all his connections with intelligence and special services, like a spider keeps the threads of its web. Harris, his voice sounded surprised. What the hell are you calling from the afterlife? Almost, I replied. I need information about the Tres Picos region. What's happening there now? My wife's in trouble. There was a pause. I knew what he was thinking. A civilian asking for intelligence data about an active combat zone because of family problems. Has he lost his mind? Are you crazy, Harris? He finally asked. Tres Picos is now freaking Vietnam on steroids. 2 cartels are fighting over territory after the feds took out El Toro. You can't go there, even if you've suddenly become immortal again. My wife is there, I said. Simple words, but they contained everything: my life, my heart, my world, compressed into 3 syllables. Another pause, then a heavy sigh, like steam being released from a boiling kettle lid. Damn you, Harris. All right, wait, he said and hung up. 12 minutes later, he called back and dictated a phone number to me. Digits burned into my memory forever. That's Ramirez. He's in Puerto Sombra now. Tell him I sent you, he'll help. But remember, Harris, I don't know you, you don't know me, and I never gave you this number. Clear. Clear, I answered. The code we understood without explanation. And one more thing, Harris. There was something like sympathy in the colonel's voice, like a broken branch underfoot. Be careful, times have changed. Even walls have ears and shadows have eyes. I understood what he meant. There had always been rats in our business, but now, when drug lords could buy entire special forces units for the price of heroin in one container, you couldn't trust anyone, not even your own shadow. I acted quickly and methodically, like a surgeon during a complex operation. Returning home, I moved the bookshelf in my study, entered the code on the hidden panel, and opened the wall safe. There was everything a person who might one day decide to disappear from radar might need. 12,000 euros in cash, a Sig Sauer P226 with a silencer, a Ka-Bar knife, a passport under another name, car documents. Insurance in case my past ever knocked on the door, pressing a pistol to my temple. I didn't think I'd be using this to save my wife. I packed the minimum necessary things in a small bag, black and inconspicuous as a shadow at midnight. Several sets of khaki and gray clothing, a first aid kit with a false bottom, chargers, sunglasses, a Panama hat. Everything inconspicuous, nothing bright, only shades that blended with road dust and jungle twilight. From the bathroom, I took shaving supplies. You can't grow a beard in a day, and I needed to change my appearance, like a snake shedding its skin. I called Ramirez. The conversation was short and businesslike, like an exchange of shots in a duel. He would provide documents for crossing the border and contacts on site. I'd pay all expenses plus his commission. No questions, no traces, like shadows at noon. Are you alone? He asked. Yes, I answered. Good, we'll meet tomorrow in Puerto Sombra Airport, private flights terminal, El Dorado Cafe. You don't know me, I don't know you. You're a tourist lost in the schedule. I took a ticket for the nearest flight via Mexico, checked my bag again, blocked credit cards in my real name, like doors of an abandoned house. Called the bank, said I had family circumstances, needed a week's vacation. Then went to bed, knowing that tomorrow I would need all the strength I had accumulated over years of training and battles. At the airport, I noticed surveillance almost immediately, two men in civilian clothes, with military bearing that gave them away like medals on a chest. They kept their distance but didn't take their eyes off me, like hounds on a scent. They were good, but not good enough. I noticed their reflection in the glass partition while drinking coffee in the waiting area. Noticed how one talked on a radio disguised as a Bluetooth headset when I headed to the boarding gate. Who sent them? FBI, bank security, or someone with more sinister intentions? I wasn't going to find out, just as a squirrel doesn't check how sharp a fox's teeth are. Using the crowd as camouflage, I changed direction several times, moving from one terminal to another. Bought a baseball cap with a Lakers logo at a souvenir kiosk, changed my jacket, put on glasses with plain lenses. Then ducked into the restroom, where I quickly shaved my mustache and applied concealing foundation to my scar, turning my face into a neutral mask. When I came out, the tail was gone. They had lost me like a grain of sand in the desert. I came to boarding last, just before gate closure, slipping into the plane like a knife into butter. Sat in my seat, buckled up and closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. I knew I was acting outside the law, risking everything: job, freedom, life. But I had no choice. Emma's life was at stake, which meant my own as well. I dozed off for a couple of hours, the old Special Forces habit of sleeping at the first opportunity, like a predator in its den. Woke to the smell of food being served by flight attendants, synthetic aroma having nothing to do with real food. Opened my eyes and almost cursed aloud, forgetting all languages except profanity. In the next seat sat Daniel Foster. We had served together for 4 years. He was the best sniper in our group, could lie motionless for hours, like a rock, waiting for the moment to shoot. His rifle barrel never trembled, breathing never faltered, finger on the trigger was an extension of his will. He had a distinctive face, narrow, with sharp cheekbones and deep-set eyes the color of wet asphalt. Add to that premature gray at the temples, and you got a character from a movie about secret operations, ruthless, but with gray hair hinting at experience paid for in blood. But there was nothing accidental about his presence here next to me, just as there are no accidents in a sniper's aimed shot. It was too big a coincidence to be chance, like two meteorites colliding in endless space. However, I put on a surprised face, like an actor on stage. "Danny, what a meeting, Sergeant." He looked at me with the same feigned surprise, like an actor in a bad play. "Nate, damn, didn't recognize you without the mustache." He extended his hand. "How many years has it been?" We shook hands. His palm was dry and rough, with calluses that only shooters who spend days on end with weapons have. 4 years, I answered, "since I retired." "And how's civilian life?" he asked, leaning back in his seat with feigned casualness. "Boring," I shrugged, "but at least no one's shooting me in the back, at least not yet." He laughed, but his laugh had no mirth, only a metallic ring, like a bullet hitting body armor. "What are you doing?" "Head of security at a bank," I answered. "And you?" "Stayed in the army." "Nah," Danny shook his head. "Resigned a year after you. Not my thing, following orders from idiots in uniform who can't tell the butt from the barrel." He paused, and I asked the obvious question. "So what are you doing now?" "Photography, hunting." His eyes flashed like a knife blade in the sun. "I'm a freelance photographer, specialize in wildlife photography. Even got published in National Geographic a couple of times." I barely kept from laughing, like holding back a hiccup. Danny Foster, a man who could hit between the eyes of a moving target from a mile away, like at a shooting gallery, now stalking butterflies and hummingbirds. "Seriously?" I asked, "and how is it?" "Pretty good," he shrugged. "Quiet, peaceful. Sometimes you have to wait a long time for the right shot, like in the old days." He winked at me. Full set of equipment in my luggage. Want to photograph local exotica, maybe sell later to travel magazines. I nodded, pretending to believe this, like a child believes in Santa Claus. In fact, I noticed several details that screamed of lies louder than an air raid siren. The callus on the index finger of his right hand, characteristic of shooters constantly pressing the trigger. Tactical military-style watch on his left wrist with compass and altimeter. Barely noticeable bulge under his light khaki jacket where a compact pistol with silencer might be hidden. "And where are you heading?" Danny asked. "Bank business." I tried to make it sound boring, like a weather report during calm. "Meeting with colleagues from the Latin American division. Paperwork, nothing interesting." "To Tres Picos." Danny raised an eyebrow like a bird of prey raising a wing. "Strange place for banking business. There are no banks there, just money laundering shops." "Not to Tres Picos itself," I corrected him. "To Puerto Sombra, we have a branch there." Danny nodded, but I saw he didn't believe a word, like a wolf doesn't believe in a lamb's innocence. He frequently checked his watch, nervously drummed his fingers on the armrest, as if tapping out Morse code. "I know you're lying." "A photographer, then?" I asked casually, as if maintaining small talk. "And didn't bring your camera for this photo hunt of yours?" Danny forced a smile, more like a grimace. "In luggage," I said. "No point dragging heavy equipment around the cabin." We both knew we were lying to each other like professional poker players, but I nodded, pretending to believe. For the rest of the flight, we exchanged routine phrases, recalled mutual acquaintances, old operations that could be discussed aloud. But behind this meaningless chatter, we carefully watched each other, like two predators who found themselves in the same territory and don't understand who is the hunter and who is the prey. We parted at the airport. Danny suggested having a beer in the evening. I agreed, and we exchanged phone numbers. Both knew that call wouldn't happen, like there's no friendship between cheetahs hunting the same gazelle. I rented an inconspicuous Jeep from a small company that didn't require a credit card and headed to the town of Santa Lucia, the nearest settlement to the place in the photo Emma had sent. On the way, I carefully watched the rearview mirror, checking for a tail, but noticed no one except a couple of fruit trucks and a local bus falling apart on the go. Santa Lucia turned out to be a dusty, poor town consisting of one main street and several alleys branching from it like octopus tentacles. Rusty signs, peeling paint on walls, stray dogs with skinny sides, wires chaotically stretched between poles like a drunk spider's web. I left the Jeep on the outskirts and entered the town on foot, like a lost tourist. The first attempts to question locals were fruitless. Most turned away, not wanting to talk to a gringo, as if from a leper. Women dragged children away, hiding them behind their colorful skirts. Men pretended not to understand English, though some surely understood every word. Finally, I entered the only bar, a cramped room with a low ceiling, where several patrons drank local moonshine that looked more like paint thinner. I sat at the counter and ordered a beer. The bartender, a fat man with tobacco-yellowed teeth and the look of a beaten dog, looked at me suspiciously but poured the beer. I put $20 on the counter and pushed them toward him, like bait to a trap. "I'm looking for a place," I said in Spanish. "Not far from here, a private villa." The bartender took the money with a quick movement, as if snatching a fly, but didn't answer, continuing to wipe glasses with a rag that looked like it had been used to clean an engine. I showed him the photo from Emma's phone. "Know where this is?" He briefly glanced at the screen and returned to wiping glasses, like an automaton performing a set program. "No." I put another $20 down. The green papers on the dark wooden counter looked alien, like exotic flowers in a swamp. "I don't want trouble, just looking for a friend." The bartender looked at the photo again, then at me. His gaze lingered on my face, as if he was trying to decide whether I was trustworthy or dangerous to his world. "Ask Juanito," he finally said, nodding toward an elderly man in the corner. He's a taxi driver, knows all the roads. I approached Juanito's table. For $50, a month's salary in these parts, he agreed to tell me about a villa in the vicinity that has a bad reputation. La Perdición, he said, leaning toward me across the table. Cursed place. Rich Americanos and Europeos come there to have fun. What kind of fun? I asked, though I already guessed from Juanito's face, wrinkled as the bark of an old tree. Juanito grinned, revealing sparse teeth that looked like darkened keys of an old piano. Whatever your heart desires, senor. Beautiful girls, beautiful boys, the best wines. And no rules, like hell, only with air conditioning. Can you take me there? Juanito's smile disappeared, as if wiped away with a wet cloth. No, senor, no one goes there now. 2 days ago there was a, how do you say, massacre. Los Diablos attacked the villa. All guests disappeared. Los Diablos. Gang, Juanito explained. Very bad people. They rob, kidnap people for ransom, cut off their enemies' heads and play football with them. I paid Juanito another $50, and he drew me a rough map of how to get to the villa, scratching the map on a napkin with a trembling hand. I decided to wait for dusk. During daylight, I would be visible in open terrain like a fly on a white wall. Closer to evening, I headed to the villa. It was about 10 miles from town, surrounded by a high fence with barbed wire. I left the jeep half a mile away and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows of trees, as if my shadow could give me away before I revealed myself. The villa was ransacked, bullet marks on white walls like pockmarks on a beautiful face, broken furniture, bloodstains on marble floors not yet fully darkened. Most valuable items were gone. Only those difficult to carry remained: heavy mahogany furniture, a white piano with broken keys, wall-mounted TVs with shattered screens. I carefully examined each room, looking for signs of Emma's presence, like a bloodhound following a trail. In one of the bedrooms, I found a blue hair clip, exactly like the one Emma had taken on the trip. A small plastic butterfly on a spring that I had given her for her birthday 3 years ago. This confirmed that she had indeed been here, in this place of perverted pleasures and hidden sins. Only one person remained at the villa, a local caretaker, frightened but greedy for money, like a rat for scraps. For a few bills, he told what had happened, words pouring from him like peas from a torn bag. The bandits came at night, senor, he said, looking around nervously. There were many of them like ants, with weapons like soldiers. They shot, took everything valuable, and took people too. What people? I asked. Guests, he shrugged, thin as a skeleton. Rich ladies from America, Europe, and boys. Boys? The caretaker grinned, showing yellow teeth like the keys of an old piano. Beautiful boys, senor, for entertaining the ladies. It's such a place, you understand, special, for rich senoras who want to, how do you say, play without their husbands. I felt everything inside me turn cold, as if my heart had turned to ice. The thoughts that Emma might have known about such things and still come. No, she couldn't. She would never. There are many beautiful boys here who do whatever the ladies wish for good money, continued the caretaker, not noticing my condition. Some ladies like to watch the boys caress each other. Others want to. My wife was here, I said through gritted teeth, among the hostages. The caretaker was momentarily embarrassed, but then grinned again, like a small merchant who sold defective goods. Your wife was here. Don't be upset, senor. All women are the same when they have money and the opportunity not to think about consequences. They're like children in a toy store. I held back the urge to hit the old man, grab his wrinkled throat and squeeze until his eyes bulged like a toad's. Instead, I showed him photos of bandits known in the region that Ramirez had sent me through a secure messenger. Recognize anyone who attacked the villa. The caretaker carefully examined the photos and pointed at one of them, a yellowed fingernail on my phone screen. El Coyote, he said. Very dangerous man. Killer, rapist, thief. He has a camp in the jungle, but no one knows exactly where. He kills everyone who approaches, even children. I knew this name from briefings 6 years ago. Manuel El Coyote Gomez, former military turned drug dealer and kidnapper. A real desert hyena, cowardly but deadly dangerous, especially to the weak and defenseless. I decided that regardless of what Emma was doing at the villa and whether she knew about its purpose, I had to save her. Like saving drowning people without asking if they can swim. We'll sort it out later. Now the main thing was to find her alive. Finding a guide turned out to be unexpectedly simple. In the same bar where I met Juanito sat a man the locals called El Gato, a lean man about 40 with a face crisscrossed with scars like a mountain terrain map. They say you can find your way to any place, I said, sitting down at his table. Depends on where you need to go, amigo, he replied without looking at me, continuing to clean his nails with the tip of a knife. To El Coyote's camp, I said, lowering my voice to a whisper. El Gato slowly turned to me. His eyes were wary but not frightened, the eyes of a man who had seen too many deaths to fear a new one. That's expensive, he said. I'll pay, I answered. And dangerous, like dancing with the devil. I know how to dance with devils. Then $800, he said. Half now, half later, if there is a later. I took out the money and placed 400 before him, a fan of green bills like leaves of an exotic plant. He quickly hid them in his shirt pocket without counting, another sign of a professional who knows his worth. We leave before dawn, said El Gato. Meet at the outskirts by the old gas station. Prepare good shoes, water, and weapons, especially weapons. At dawn, we plunged into the jungle. El Gato walked ahead, showing the way like Virgil to Dante in hell. I watched him carefully, ready for betrayal like for a snake bite, but he seemed to be genuinely fulfilling his part of the deal, leading me through the labyrinth of greenery with the confidence of a man for whom the jungle was a second home. We moved along barely visible trails, following weak signs of human presence, broken branches, tire tracks on wet soil, scraps of cigarette packs. I recalled tracking skills learned in special forces, and they returned as if I had never left service, as if the last years had been just a short sleep between battles. By evening, we reached the edge of the jungle. Ahead, in a small valley, could be seen an abandoned village, several dozen huts, partially destroyed like teeth in an old man's smile. But I noticed signs of life, smoke from fires, patrols on the outskirts, several SUVs hidden under camouflage netting, like predators under foliage. We found a convenient observation post and settled there, like snipers in position. Through binoculars, I examined the camp, about 20 armed men, most with machine guns hanging carelessly on their shoulders. In the center of the camp was a deep pit covered with a metal grating. Periodically, a guard approached it and lowered bottles of water and something that looked like bread on a rope. That's where they keep the women, El Gato whispered, in the pit like rats. I continued surveying, scanning the camp like radar. In a separate barracks, judging by the reinforced guard, were other prisoners, probably men from the villa, doomed to quick death or slow dying in quarries. I began making a plan. Wait for darkness, silently eliminate sentries on the perimeter one by one like removing pieces from a chessboard. Then take out guards at the barracks and pit, free the prisoners and leave before dawn while the main bandit forces slept their drunken sleep. Risky but doable. I made notes on the map, marked guard positions, approximate number of bandits, escape routes. You go back, I told El Gato, giving him the second half of the payment. I'll go on alone. You're crazy, amigo, the guide shook his head. There are many of them and they have weapons. They'll kill you slowly, cutting off piece by piece until you beg for death. I have weapons too, I said, taking the pistol from my bag. And I have experience. El Gato looked at me carefully. then at the weapon in my hand, gleaming in the rays of the setting sun. "Your military right, commandos." I didn't answer, but he understood from my gaze, which suddenly became cold as ice in the mountains. "Good luck to you," he said, getting up. "You'll need it." He left, leaving me alone at the edge of the jungle, with binoculars, weapons, and a rescue plan. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky red, the color of blood that would soon be spilled. Ahead was a night that could be my last, but I felt no fear, only cold determination and readiness to do everything to save Emma, even if it meant turning El Coyote's camp into a cemetery. Preparing for the operation, I checked my weapons, camouflaged myself with dirt and branches to blend with the jungle like a chameleon with tree bark. Mentally rehearsed the plan, imagining every step, every movement, every opponent. In my head echoed the words I repeated before every dangerous mission: fast, quiet, forever. I knew I was risking everything, but losing Emma would be worse than losing my own life. It would be equivalent to death, only more painful and prolonged. Chapter 4: Confrontation. The silence of the jungle pressed on my eardrums, that special form of silence that's actually filled with 1,000 sounds. The chirping of insects, resembling a miniature telegraph's work, distant cries of monkeys calling to each other in the tree crowns, the rustling of leaves disturbed by the night wind. I lay in cover, feeling the earth absorb my body heat like a sponge absorbs water. Stars winked through gaps in the foliage, like accomplices in a secret operation. 10 minutes remained until the assault began. In such moments, time always slows down, stretches like rubber, and a kaleidoscope of strange thoughts flies through your head. I thought of Emma, not the one who sat now in the earthen pit, but the one I had met 11 years ago, with hair glistening from rain and a smile that held the promise of happiness, like a seed in soil. I wondered, does she still exist somewhere, that girl? Or are we all just collections of different versions of ourselves, like photos in an album, and each choice creates a new person, erasing traces of the previous one, like a wave erases a pattern in the sand? I checked my weapon one last time. Magazine full, round in the chamber, safety off. Knife in the sheath on my belt, another in my boot. Body smeared with dirt and covered with fallen leaves so as not to reflect moonlight, an old special forces trick, ancient as war itself. Mentally, I once more repeated the plan. First sentry on the northern edge, knife. Second by the generator, stranglehold. Then sentries at the barracks and pits silently, one by one. Free the prisoners, primarily the women, considering that Emma was there, among them, in that earthen grave for the living. Lead everyone into the jungle before dawn, while the main bandit forces hadn't noticed their comrades missing. Hide southwest, toward San Cristobal Church. There's an abandoned monastery where we could take shelter and provide first aid to the injured. The plan was simple, almost primitive, but with minimum variables and failure points. As they taught us in special forces, complex plans fail complexly, simple ones simply. I knew the chances of success were about 1 in 5, but there were no other options. If Emma didn't receive help in the next 24 hours, she might not survive in tropical climate. Dehydration sets in quickly, especially under stress and with limited access to water. The clock showed 01:57. Time. I exhaled, focusing like a shooter before the shot, and flowed through the undergrowth, literally flowed, moving as taught, rolling from toe to whole foot, transferring body weight smoothly, creating no soil vibrations that an experienced patrol might feel, like a spider feels the trembling of its web. The first sentry was smoking, leaning against a tree. His silhouette in the starlight seemed flat, two-dimensional, like cut from black paper. He didn't hear my approach, only felt for a moment the cold of the blade at his throat, and then nothing but darkness that swallowed him like the ocean swallows raindrops. I carefully lowered the body to the ground and moved on, gliding between trees like a ghost. The second sentry was more careful, stayed in the open, regularly looked around, tapping his fingers on the stock of his machine gun. I had to freeze and wait almost 10 minutes until he turned his back long enough. When he did, I was already behind him, enclosing his neck in a hold. The struggle was brief. He jerked a few times like a caught fish and went limp in my arms as if air had been let out of him. I dragged the body into the bushes, took his weapon and radio, and prepared to move to the center of the camp, where the barracks with male prisoners and the pit with women were located. But then from the opposite side of the camp came shots, short, precise, suppressed by a silencer. Chaos began, like in a disturbed anthill, shouts in Spanish, flashlight beams darting between trees like panicked fireflies. I froze, pressing into the ground like a lizard under a predator's gaze. What was happening? Had they spotted me? No, judging by the direction of the shouts, the attack came from the south side. Had someone else decided to attack El Coyote's camp? Competitors? Federals? Or was this a trap planned by the bandits to detect hostile presence? The shooting continued, short, precise bursts from a suppressed machine gun, single shots from a pistol, cries of the wounded. The attackers' tactics were painfully familiar, methodical advance from perimeter to center, eliminating guards along the way without unnecessary sounds and movements. I had seen this in dozens of operations, like watching a film you know by heart. Pressed to the ground, I crawled to the nearest cover, a fallen tree at the edge of the clearing, resembling a sleeping crocodile. From there, I had a good view of the camp center. In the light of the floodlights, which the bandits had finally turned on, I made out the attacker, and the blood in my veins turned to liquid nitrogen. Danny Foster, my former comrade in arms, moved through the camp like death itself clothed in human form. Relentlessly, methodically, without haste or hesitation, like a chess player executing a pre-planned game. He was dressed in black tactical gear, face covered by a balaclava, but I recognized him by his characteristic manner of movement, economical, fluid, with perfect control of every muscle. You can't fake or copy that. It comes only with years of real combat operations, like handwriting that can't be forged. Danny was armed with ultra-modern equipment, a compact suppressed machine gun, a pistol in a thigh holster, knives in sheaths on his tactical vest. He moved from cover to cover, each time calculating his new position before moving, exactly as instructors with faces weathered by all the world's deserts had taught us. The camp had turned to chaos. The bandits fired randomly into the darkness, but Danny was a ghost appearing for a moment, making a few precise shots and disappearing like a mirage in the desert. I remembered what he was like then in Afghanistan, the best sniper in the unit, a man who could lie motionless for days, detaching from his own body, becoming an extension of his rifle, merging with the terrain like a drop of water with the ocean. Wildlife photographer, huh? I thought with a bitter smile. National Geographic, indeed. At that moment, Danny eliminated another bandit, shooting him precisely between the shoulder blades, and continued moving toward the barracks with the same fluidity with which mercury flows down an inclined surface. I decided not to intervene yet, observing Danny's actions like a spectator watching a dance of death. After all, he was doing my work for me, eliminating guards, clearing the path to the prisoners. When he finished, I could approach and together with him free the hostages, joining forces as in the old days. I didn't yet know what nightmare awaited me ahead. Danny methodically advanced through the camp, leaving corpses behind like footprints in sand. His movements betrayed years of professional fighter training, clean, refined, devoid of anything human. He made no mistakes, showed no emotions, just performed the task with the cold efficiency of an automaton programmed to destroy everything living in a designated sector. Finally, Danny reached the barracks where the male prisoners were held. I expected him to break down the door, eliminate the guards, free the prisoners. Instead, he took a grenade from his vest, pulled the pin, and threw it through the window like a boy throwing a stone into a pond. The world seemed to slow down, frames of life succeeding each other as if in slow motion. I couldn't believe my eyes. Danny ran several steps away and fell to the ground, covering his head with his hands. A muffled explosion followed like a giant's cough. The barracks shuddered, flames burst from the windows, bright as a redhead's hair. The screams inside almost immediately subsided, but Danny, getting up, fired another burst through the door and walls, as if wanting to make sure no one survived. Nausea rose to my throat like a wave to the shore. Why? Why? They were unarmed, helpless, locked in a wooden cage. It made no sense unless the goal of his operation was to eliminate all witnesses to something. And then a terrible realization pierced me, sharp as a bayonet. Danny was heading to the pit where the women were held, where Emma was. He was going to do the same to them, turn the pit into a mass grave. I had no time for reflection. I burst from cover like a panther from undergrowth, pointing my machine gun at my former friend. "Danny, drop your weapon," I shouted, my voice sounding hoarse and unfamiliar as if someone else's. He turned sharply. Even through the balaclava, I saw his eyes widen in surprise. Two gray slits suddenly became round as coins. But a second later, his gaze became cold and determined, like a snake before striking. Without a word, he raised his machine gun and opened fire on me, as if we had never sat by the same campfire, never shared the last water flask in the sands of Afghanistan, never covered each other's backs in dozens of battles. I barely managed to dive behind the nearest cover, a rusted jeep, when bullets whistled over my head like angry wasps. Thus began our deadly dance of two professionals who were once friends, now on opposite sides of an invisible line. We circled the camp like two wolves, leaders of warring packs: dash, shot, roll, position change. Both knew each other's tactics, both used the same techniques, both were trained by the same instructors with weathered faces and eyes that had seen too many deaths. Like fighting your own reflection in a mirror, only the reflection was trying to kill you. Instead of words, only glances and shots, speaking louder than any curses. Danny's face remained inscrutable, like a no-theater mask. In his eyes, I saw the cold determination of a professional performing a task, but not hatred. This made what was happening even more chilling. He was killing not out of malice, but because that was the mission, a line in a contract, like for an accountant, a figure in the balance. I shot from behind a barrel, hitting him in the shoulder. Danny staggered but immediately responded with a burst, grazing my leg. Hot pain shot through my thigh like a branding iron, but adrenaline dulled it, turning it into distant noise of waves on a beach. When we both ran out of ammunition, we switched to hand-to-hand combat, throwing aside the useless metal. This wasn't an ordinary fight. It was a deadly duel of equally strong and skilled fighters who knew all each other's weaknesses, anticipating every movement like chess players calculating the game 10 moves ahead. We circled the clearing, exchanging blows. Fist, block, sweep, dodge. The rhythm of the duel was precise as a clockwork assembled by Swiss masters. At one moment, our eyes met like knife blades, and I saw in my former friend's eyes a fleeting hesitation, a shadow of doubt that flashed like a cloud in a clear sky. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but I noticed something human still remained in him, like embers in a cooling campfire. The moment of weakness cost me dearly. Danny used an unexpected technique that wasn't in our shared training, something from Chinese kung fu or Indonesian pencak silat, which he had learned after our paths diverged like tree branches. He knocked me off my feet with a hard blow to the knee and pressed a knife to my throat, the blade gleaming in the floodlights like a silver snake. I waited for the end, looking into his eyes. Strangely, I felt no fear, only dull sadness that I would die at the hands of a man with whom I had once shared the last cigarette, with whom I had survived hell and returned to tell about it. But Danny, holding the knife to my throat, suddenly froze. Something flashed in his eyes, a memory, remorse, a shadow of that young sniper who once just wanted to return home alive. And he abruptly stood up without delivering the fatal blow, as if he had seen a ghost. Without a word, he turned and walked briskly toward the pit with the female prisoners, decisively, but without the former predator's fluidity. Something had broken in his perfect killing machine. Danny managed to fire only 2 bursts into the pit when he was hit by a bullet from one of the surviving bandits who jumped out from behind the barracks corner like a genie from a lamp. The bullet hit him in the back, went through his chest. I saw the red fountain that burst from his chest, like a bloody flower against the black background of night. I saw him stagger, take another step, as if refusing to accept death, and fall to his knees, like a believer before the altar of an unknown God. I picked up the machine gun lying nearby and instantly shot the bandit, dropping him like a butcher drops a carcass. Then I rushed to the pit past Danny's body, hunched on the ground like a broken doll. My heart pounded like a jackhammer as I approached the edge. In the dim light of the floodlight, I saw 2 motionless figures lying at the bottom. Both women, both without movement, like mannequins in an abandoned store window. One in dark clothes, the other in light pajamas that I recognized like my reflection in a mirror. Emma. Emma? I frantically searched for a rope to descend, like a firefighter looking for an exit from a burning building. Finding a rough rope ladder at the edge of the pit, I quickly descended, jumping over steps, risking breaking my neck. The woman in dark clothes lay with open eyes, not breathing, with bullet holes in her chest, neat as sewing stitches. All of Danny's shots hit her right in the heart, perfect professional work. It was Victoria Kingsley. Even death hadn't erased from her face the expression of arrogant superiority, frozen like a plaster mask. Next to her lay Emma, pale as canvas, with closed eyes, hair tangled, lips dry, cracked. But her chest rose and fell weakly in an uneven rhythm, a sign of life clinging to the body like a mollusk to a rock. Alive. I carefully lifted her, checked her pulse, weak but stable like the ticking of an old clock. She was unconscious, dehydrated, exhausted, in shock, but without gunshot wounds. Danny's bullets had missed her, like the angel of death passes by a house marked with a secret sign. I picked her up in my arms like a child and struggled out of the pit, like Orpheus returning from the realm of the dead with a precious burden. Carefully laying Emma on the grass in the shade of trees where she was relatively safe, I returned to Danny. He was still alive, though blood had soaked all his clothes in front like wine soaks a white tablecloth. I knew the wound was fatal. The bullet had surely hit a lung and possibly the heart. Time was counted in minutes, like in speed chess. Kneeling beside him, I noticed Danny trying to say something, like a fish thrown ashore. I leaned closer, smelling blood, gunpowder, and something else, the smell of departing life. Nate, his voice was barely audible, like the rustle of leaves. Forgive. Why, Danny? I asked, supporting his head, which seemed unexpectedly heavy. Who sent you? Danny coughed, dark blood flowed from his lips, almost black in the night light. Alexander Kingsley, Victoria's husband, he managed. I've worked for him. 3 years, perform delicate tasks like a plumber, cleaning clogs in the Empire's pipes. He paused, trying to draw air into his punctured lung, which was already filling with blood like a glass with wine. His wife decided she could cheat on him, spend his money on call boys. He endured for a long time, but when he found out about this villa, Danny coughed again. I was ordered to eliminate her and all witnesses to this disgrace. Everyone, to the last one, especially her friends. I listened silently, all the puzzle pieces finally falling into place, like a mosaic gaining meaning. I was following her, Danny continued, grabbing my hand with unexpected strength of the dying. Found out about the trip, was supposed to infiltrate the villa and eliminate everyone. But these damn bandits attacked earlier, everything went wrong. Had to improvise like a jazz musician. Blood bubbled on his lips like champagne in a glass, eyes beginning to glaze, a gaze that no longer sees this world but something beyond its limits. Why didn't you kill me, and why didn't you shoot Emma? I asked, tasting salt on my lips. Danny smiled weakly, the smile of yawning death. We went through hell together, brother, he whispered. And I sincerely hope your wife isn't like all of them. She's not from their circle, not from the diamond whores with porcelain smiles. With these words, Danny went limp in my arms like a broken doll. For another second, he looked somewhere past me, through me as if seeing something inaccessible to the living. Then his gaze dimmed like an old mirror, and I knew he was dead, not as a soldier, not as a hero, not as a killer, but simply as a person who had made his final choice. I closed his eyes and said a short prayer that we always said over fallen comrades. Rest in peace, brother. We'll finish the job. I returned to Emma, who was still unconscious like a sleeping princess from a fairy tale. Examining her more carefully, I found no serious injuries, only bruises, abrasions, rope marks on her wrists, and signs of severe dehydration. I gave her water from my flask, moistened her forehead and lips like a mother does with a sick child. Then I picked her up and moved away from the camp, heading into the jungle like a hunted animal carrying its cub to safety. Walking was difficult, like through molasses. My leg, wounded by Danny, ached with every step, throbbing pain radiating throughout my body. Emma seemed incredibly heavy, though I knew she had lost several pounds during captivity, like a leaf loses moisture in drought. After an hour of walking, I found what I was looking for, an abandoned hunter's hut that El Gato had told me about. The roof had partially collapsed in places, letting in starlight, but the walls were strong, and inside was dry as in a mummy's nostrils. I laid Emma on an improvised bed of branches and dry leaves, covered her with my jacket like a shield. Then I set about arranging our temporary shelter, checked the perimeter, set primitive traps for pursuers, tin cans on strings, dry branches under leaves, all these ancient tricks as old as the world, which work better than any electronics. Collected rainwater from a barrel near the hut, made a small fire to warm up and scare away snakes and spiders, for whom the hut might be home. Caring for Emma, I thought about Danny's words, about what I had learned at the villa, about the mosaic now forming in my mind. What was Emma doing in such a place? Had she really gone there knowing its true purpose? Or had Victoria deceived her, like professional cheats deceive an inexperienced player? Part of me wanted to believe in her innocence, as a child believes in non-existent heroes. Another part feared the truth, like a patient fears diagnosis. Several hours passed. I dozed in fits, waking every 20 minutes from the slightest noise to check Emma's condition and listen to the jungle sounds, like monitoring radio waves for distress signals. Closer to dawn, Emma moaned and opened her eyes. They were cloudy, foggy, like windows in rain. At first, there was only fear in her gaze, primal, animal, akin to what a gazelle feels at the sight of a cheetah. She didn't understand where she was, in what world, in what reality. Then she saw me, and such relief, such pure joy reflected in her eyes, like a ray of sun breaking through clouds after a month of continuous rain. All my doubts instantly evaporated like dew at dawn. Nate, her voice was hoarse from thirst, like sand rustling underfoot. You came, beloved, you found me. Of course I came, I answered, helping her sit up and bringing the flask to her lips. Did you think I'd abandon you? She drank greedily, then looked at me again, eyes moist with tears like dewdrops on leaves. I was so afraid I'd die there, in that cursed pit, that I'd never see you, never be able to say. Hush, I interrupted her. It's all behind us, you're safe, we're safe. But she shook her head like a stubborn child. No, I must say it now. She took my hand, squeezing with unexpected strength. Nate, I was such a fool. I let Victoria draw me into her world. I thought I wanted more, that I deserved more. But when I realized where she had brought me, what was happening there, Emma shuddered. I locked myself in the room, refused to participate in this, told her she was crazy. I would never, never betray you, Nate, never. I hugged her tightly, feeling the tension that had been building in me all these days finally release, like a bowstring after the shot. I know, I whispered into her hair, I know. We sat embracing for a long time, listening to the jungle awakening, first birds, then insects, rustling and whispering of leaves, as if the earth itself was stretching after sleep. The first rays of sun penetrated through cracks in the hut walls, drawing golden stripes on the earthen floor, like directional arrows to a new life. What now? Emma finally asked, her voice carrying the weariness of many days. Now we go home, I answered, and start everything anew, with a clean slate without looking back. She nodded, laying her head on my shoulder like a trusting child. You know, she said quietly, I think I always knew that real life is what we had. Simple, honest, without pretense and falsehood. I just forgot about it for a while, like a person deafened by a siren can't hear the quiet beating of their own heart. I kissed her temple, smelling of sweat and jungle dirt, feeling warmth spreading in my chest, similar to what the first sip of coffee gives on a chilly morning. We'll have time to fix everything, I said. We'll have our whole lives. She smiled through tears, like a flower through a crack in asphalt. Promise, promise. We spent several more days in the jungle, waiting for Emma to gain enough strength for the long journey. El Gato kept his word. On the fourth day, he came for us with supplies and led us to Santa Lucia, from where we were able to reach the American consulate, presenting the story in a somewhat edited version. At home, a surprise awaited us. The test showed that Emma was pregnant. She cried upon learning the result, but now these were tears of happiness, like rain ending a drought. She quit the store the same day. I want to devote myself to our family, she said, and her voice held that sincerity that can't be faked, like you can't fake the taste of spring water. We never spoke again about Victoria Kingsley or those terrible days in the jungle. There was no need. We had gained from this trial everything we were meant to gain. Understanding of the true value of what we'd always had but nearly lost in pursuit of mirages. Each other. Our love imperfect, sometimes boring, often mundane, but real, like bread and water for the starving. Emma gave the emerald earrings to charity without the slightest regret. I didn't object. Sometimes the most beautiful things have too high a price, and it's not about money, but about what they truly cost: soul, conscience, love that can't be bought for any jewels. Our daughter was born the following spring, a healthy girl with sea-green eyes like Emma's and my stubborn chin. We named her Hope, because hope was what led us through the jungle, which turned out to be not only in Central America, but also within ourselves. If you enjoyed this story, support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.